an event with Mr. Sennychenko, the head of the State Property Fund, concerning the privatization initiative which has been started just now through new laws. The organizer of this online meeting is ICBAC, International Council of Business Associations and Chambers in Ukraine. This is a loose council with 10 members, starting from the Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce, where we have the privilege to be now. They have made available their beautiful Coliseum with all the equipment for this event. It's also, as members, it is the British-Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce, the German-Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce, the French-Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce, the Swedish Business Association, the Ukrainian-Austrian Association. This is an association I have founded and I am presiding. Overseas, it's the US-Ukrainian Business Council. It is the Canada-Ukraine Chamber of Commerce. It's the Chinese Commerce Association, and it's the Turkish International Turkish Business Association. We have today online representatives from all but one of our members, just the Turkish Business Association is not represented because their head, Mr. Burak Pehlivan, has a very important meeting where he has to accompany the Turkish ambassador. But all of our members have shared the link for online streaming on YouTube. So there will be also a lot of Turkish potential investors watching and following our today's meeting. I would like to ask Mr. Korotka from the Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce, Vice President, to have a greeting address. And again, thanks very much for UCCI to host, to get us this venue for this event. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Dear colleagues, I'm pleased to welcome everyone here today at the Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We are going to discuss topical issue of Ukrainian privatization process. I will have some short talks, and first of all, I like to admit that we fully support the legislative initiative of the Ukrainian State Property Fund in terms of making privatization regulation friendly to the potential buyers. First of all, we hope that adoption of the bill will provide an opportunity to attract more potential participation, including foreign companies. From another hand, we expect that after the bill will be adopted, the State Property Fund in Ukraine will become a national profitable company based on world great experience. The Ukrainian government should. And so, taking the opportunity, I would like to thank ICBAC members for their time for being here, especially Mr. Alfred Praus, and who made many efforts today's event, and the chairman of Ukrainian State Property Fund, Mr. Sennychenko. Thank you. For the consideration of national foreign business environment. Thank you. And a good day. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Let us directly proceed to our issue. I may ask Mr. Sennychenko to have a short summary of what is your task, your initiative, before we start into a question and answer session. Floor is yours.
With pleasure. Good morning, everybody. Glad to be here with you. Thank you very much for this event. It's extremely important for us as the State Property Fund to deliver the information about upcoming privatization process, to get support for our initiatives, because indeed we are doing this for the business. I will give a small presentation, but to be short, the main goal of what we are doing is to get rid of exceeding non-core assets of the state, which Ukraine has still too much. And in the same time, these are the objects, the subject for the investment menu. We have done something. Other people say that we have done a lot in the previous years to start this process. The privatization is not a new process in Ukraine, but it has negative image because in the 90s it was voucher privatization, it was strange procedure. In later 200 and further it was so-called oligarch privatization. So now we are changing the rules. We are changing the rules that the information, the assets would be available for everybody on the equal competitive basis with proper disclosure information, protection of investment rights. So this is the main task and the main philosophy. We have been working in the year 2020, build the institution, to bring up the team, to change the procedures, and we've done what we could do within the existing framework. During the year 2020, we have analyzed the problems and the problems that the business is facing, that we have described in the new law. This new law was submitted to the parliament with the support on initiative of 44 members of parliament from various parties and fractions. We have been doing a lot of communication initially when we drafted this law with the business association, getting the feedbacks, working with the government, working with the other stakeholders. And now we have the law which have to facilitate the process of privatization, make it more direct, more open, and hopefully that within this year and next year we will do much more for the business, to bring more investments in Ukraine, to give comfort for the investors, to give more security for investors, and to give them actually the investment menu. So thank you very much again for organizing this event. Let me share with you the presentation, and then I will answer all the questions that everybody will have. So, new legislation, new opportunities. I will be managing. First of all, there is a myth that state property fund is managing all state property, which is not true. It's 96 government bodies are managing state-owned enterprises in Ukraine. This is too much for making clear policies, to making proper corporate governance, and it resulted to big losses. Official data from State Security Service that in year 2019, all these state companies, they gave losses amounting 170 billion hryvnias for the Ukrainian budget. We have figures, approximately 3,600 state-owned enterprises are still registered in Ukraine. Why I'm saying approximately? Because these 96 government bodies are not submitting proper reporting, are not delivering proper information, disclosure, and one of the key innovations of this law also to create a clear criteria, what is the core assets, what should be stay with the government, what should be easily given to the private sector. And we know that many countries of Eastern Europe went through this process, and we want to go through this process of privatization within the next 2-3 years, and actually keep within the state only those which are critical infrastructure or have some special social functions, and those companies and assets that could be and should be managed by the private business should be delivered to the market on the open, transparent auctions of privatization. So apart from state companies, which amounting like 3,600, we have enormous amount of state assets, so-called standalone assets, which are buildings, brownfields. We have done inspections of 9% only of those assets, and it's absolutely clear that approximately 15 of those assets are misused or illegally rented or just empty. So if we multiply it to the existing amount, we can see that 28 million square meters, or approximately 400 Louvre museums, are misused or empty within the Ukraine, around all country, in large cities, small cities. They are very different, but they are still the subject for potential interest for small business, medium business, large business. And when Ukrainian officials are inviting investors, investors are asking, so where the investment menu? So please come to the country, invest in Ukraine. So where to invest? These are the assets to invest, not only the companies, but also a lot of non-core assets. Since the State Property Fund is not new institution, we have done a lot of efforts to reform it in the year 2020, and we have some results. We have launched much more auctions. We completely changed the procedure. Instead of the newspaper which was issued with the information what will be on sale and when, we have now a website, we have data rooms, we have prepared together with international donors community the virtual data rooms that everybody can go inside and look on the data, disclosure. So this is what is important, I believe, for the comfort of investors, to understand what is on sale, to create the approximate price they can pay for this, because majority of these assets are still distressed assets, and they have some problems, they have some potential, but everybody should know everything. This is our main principles. You can see the results on the screen. In the year 2020, we exceeded budget that was approved for the State Property Fund in 5 times. Even in this difficult year of coronavirus, we have brought to the budget 10 times more than in year 2018 and 5 times more than in year 2019. So it shows that comfort, disclosure, clear procedures give the results. What are the problems? The problems are existing bureaucracy. I like bureaucracy. I like good bureaucracy, clear bureaucracy. It's not possible to work without bureaucracy, but the existing bureaucracy is exhausting for State Property Fund, exhausting for the investors. We have to prepare 21,000 documents quarterly, 70 internal documents generated for every assets, dozens of signatures, which doesn't have, honestly saying, a lot of meaning. And of course, the other problems are the sabotage, because those 96 government state agencies are not willing to get rid of those assets. Why? Because this is the source of corruption. The state-owned assets, the state-owned companies are the largest corruption in Ukraine. And all we know, who online and who is in this nice, exactly very good room, we know that Ukraine is, the largest problems probably is the corruption, the justice, and getting rid from the assets which are the source for corruption. It's, from my point of view, the most effective tool to fight with corruption, exactly. Only NABU, National Anti-Corruption Bureau, they are investigating the cases of loss-making amounting on 20 billion hryvnias in the state-owned enterprises. At the same time, another problem was the weakness of the institution. The State Property Fund is the central executive body, which is subordinated to Cabinet of Ministers. And we were lacking of resources, funds, average age of the computers and IT system 18 years. And the salaries are average salary 15,000 hryvnia in the organization. And of course, it took us a lot of efforts to raise this issue to the political level, to work with the donors community who helped us a lot in bringing some tools, IT solutions, We have office support team. We have investor relations office, which gives all information to potential investors to understand how, when, what are the procedures. So, but this was the very beginning, the previous year. This law aiming to facilitate, to give better road for the investments to Ukraine, facilitating privatization. Another confirmation of non-effective governance of state-owned enterprises you can see on the screen. The government of Ukraine has made decision 1 year ago, transfer to state property fund 530 companies for privatization. 1 year ago, the decision was made with the list of specific companies. Only 400 still transferred for the privatization. What we can see in those companies, that 191 out of those 408 do not operate. We are looking for the directors with the police. So this is the quality of corporate governance. Another 103 are in the process of liquidation or bankruptcy already. 78 their debts exceeding assets in multiplied time, and only 40 somehow profitable. The recent decision of current government in August was also transfer of another 200 companies to the state property fund to prepare them for the privatization. We are still in the process of getting them and analyzing them before delivering to the market. So in short, the governance is very weak, and Ukraine have to make a clear decision which companies, minimum size, minimum number of the companies should stay under the corporate governance and management of the state, and the rest should be delivered to the market. We are preparing this, we've done a lot to make this process very clear, but it's important to get more and more assets to be delivered to the market. This is the new process of getting documents. Then we are preparing teasers. Then we have virtual data rooms that you can dig in on our website, privatization.gov.ua. Then you can have physical access and additional discovery of the assets, and then the auction. So this is completely new process, and we have to bring more and more assets into this process to be delivered on the market. So this is what the law about. It covers all roadmap, starting from identifying which assets to be transferred, then clear criteria for the cabinet of ministers to make decision, then gives necessary resources to state property fund to prepare these assets for the privatization, and then investors receive clear information, some guarantees, some comfort to invest. So we've been drafting this law 10 months, involving a lot of stakeholders, advocating preliminary within the various fractions, various committees in the parliament, aiming to make this very complex law better prepared for the adoption in the parliament. Because this law, it makes changes into the 27 laws on Ukraine and makes changes into 3 codes: tax code, budget code, and administrative code. So by all this complex law, we are delivering the new road. I am saying that now we are running between the trees in the forest, aiming to reach the light. And it's difficult road within the existing legislation. This law, it gives us the autobahn, straight road through the forest, that we will be able, during the next 2 or 3 years, deliver all non-core assets to the market in a better way. And the aim of privatization is not to get as much as more possible revenues to the budget. The main aim, political aim of privatization, is to find investors who will invest 1 hryvnia in initial purchasing, but in addition to this initial purchasing, the investor will invest additional, we are saying 4-6 hryvnias. This is average investment after privatization into these assets, creating working places, tax base, and others. So this is the main political goal of privatization. The second political goal, I would say, fight with corruption. And only the third, potential revenues to the state budget. This year we have asked the parliament to budget 12 billion hryvnias for revenues for privatization in the state budget. So the previous year was 500 millions, and this year 12 billion hryvnias. So we would like to multiply this, and for this we need facilitation, including this law. So a little bit more in details about the law itself. Simplification of transferring process of these assets to the privatization. So it describes more clear criteria which out of those 3,600 companies or other standalone assets should be transferred for the privatization. If the object is not used efficiently or non-properly, if it's in tax line, if it has debts, if it's no good reason, just no good reason, because ministries and state-owned agencies should better do their work, policy making, because they are overloaded with managing those multiplied number of companies, and they cannot do good policy making, and at the same time they cannot do the management of enterprises simultaneously. This is when we compared with the judge on the football playing field. Then the judge cannot play football simultaneously with doing the good judge. The state should establish the clear rule, clear regulation, anti-monopoly, justice, and manage the private sector efficiently, collecting taxes, with those taxes executing its state obligations. So this is the philosophy that we are putting in this reform. Another part of this legislation is about giving more security to the investors. So we are implementing the English law on the big privatization assets. So if they are acquired in Ukraine by year 2024, if there is a potential some dispute, you can go under the jurisdiction of English law and protect your rights. Also, the large privatization through online auctions. So everything what we have done in the previous year, all this better disclosure, virtual data room, this was done by us voluntarily. So it's not obligatory. We want to make it fixed in the law and sub-laws, that these transparent procedures are legally described and they are obligatory, but it's not our goodwill. It should be obligatory for the state property fund in the next future. And some other instruments using public-private partnership, right to conduct initial public offering, disclosure and information. Another block of these innovations on this law is the rights, and I don't see it on the screen, and the assets cannot be seized during the privatization. The protection of the state rights. There is a lot of attempts to get these assets in non-transparent way, using non-reformed justice, court system, enforcement agencies. So we have put in this law a lot of innovations that should protect against this non-reformed enforcement agencies and non-reformed legislation. Prevent bankruptcy, harmonize legislation regarding bankruptcy when the decision is to privatize and made, allows terminate special features of bankruptcy. These are all innovations in this law that we know from practical side, which are the problems for better and faster privatization. Also, we are facing every day a lot of resistance from the previous so-called shadow owners of these assets, which are not willing to go on the market. And a lot of, we called it previous shadow interessants. They are using the problems in the Ukrainian legislation, trying to keep the control. And we have 1,400 courts for the moment at the State Property Fund to protect the rights of these assets, to protect the rights of the state. And also one of the issues is to general legislation regarding ability to carry out restructuring, liquidation, and also termination of the directors who are not willing to go for the contracts. We have prepared with NAZK the new contracts for the directors, which are motivating for privatization, having bonus at the final stage, and also creating the very strict red lines not to make the asset financial position worse. Some changes we are doing for the law on state property fund, which is creation of the board state property fund, because honestly saying, I am as a chairman of the state property fund today, I have extra rights and extra powers. So we would like to create a board that me and my deputies are having some discussions and disputes. Also, a lot of claims which we are getting also, unfortunately, because of non-reformed justice system and courts directly against employees. And a lot of people are just afraid to do their work. They say we do everything according to the law and to the sub-laws. At the same time, we are suffering from somebody who is making its ideas and going to court to seize a physical person, the employee of the fund. So if everything according to the law and sub-laws, this should be the claim against the institution, but not against the physical person who is working in there, if everything according to the law. And this is a revolutionary thing. Due to this innovation, I hope we will get the vast support from the various local communities, as we know that it's more and more decentralization process going on in the Ukraine, and all these assets for privatization, big, small, medium size, they are located at the territory of Ukraine in the large cities, small cities, villages. So we think it's fair that if the state-owned assets will be sold on the privatization, 10% of this revenue will stay with the local budget. This will give motivation for the local mayor and community to be the promoter, the broker, to bring more investors, to show them the assets. Because honestly saying, what is still the problem, that we have done a lot, but we didn't have funds for marketing, for better information. We didn't have access to the television. So we need more information, disclosure, and dissemination to the business, local and international. That's why I'm here today with you. The process is going. Please check the website. Please look on this asset or another assets. So we need now more marketing. With this tool, when we are leaving some 10% from small-scale privatization to local budgets, I hope will give incentive to local budgets, to the members of parliament who are elected locally to support this law. And if we will go back to the whole philosophy and policy of privatization, it doesn't contradict, because we do this privatization for bringing investments. We are not doing this only to getting revenues to the centralized budget. This is not the source to fill in the centralized budget. Also, another innovation that we would like to keep like 10% from large or maybe 20% from small scale privatization to the government bodies that previously managed this asset before it transferred to state property fund. For example, we have a lot of old Ministry of Justice has a lot of old prisons, sorry, old prisons, which are located in the central parts of the cities. Some of those are not working, they're empty. So these are the nice brownfield for any development. So if the Ministry of Justice will transfer to this assets to the State Property Fund for privatization, and within the existing law, all money from privatization will go to centralized budget. And Minister of Justice will not have money to build a new prison out of town. So we are proposing to keep 10-20% from the privatization to the managing body who previously managed these assets. Hopefully this also motivates to transfer these non-core assets to the privatization. And 2-3% is for preparation of the next revolving fund to prepare the next assets for the privatization, because, for example, 57% of state-owned building, they don't have registration. You have to prepare technical document, you have to pay for this, you have to conduct due diligence, audit, to make it clear for the potential investor. This all requires some resources, so we don't want to be dependent every year from the money given to this from the budget. This is self-financing revolving fund. You sold it for 100, you keep 2% to prepare the next asset for the privatization. So these are the incentives in this law and innovations that we feel give more support for this law. So to conclude my presentation, we should be all together here. We really need your support. We need the voice of the business, because sometimes people think that I need it and IMF need this. No, this is the business, we believe, who need these better rules, who need better disclosure. And in this stage of advocating this law, we really need your support. The letter to the member of parliament, the voice of the business, that we have money, Ukrainians have money. Not all, unfortunately, but there is a lot of money which are in the offshores or under the mattresses. So we would like to bring this money from the offshores, from under the mattresses, into the economy, into the assets that to be put on the privatization. And this law is the autobahn which have to bring us to the light faster and better. So let's be united here. Thank you for your attention. I am with you, ready to answer all the questions.
Dimitro, thank you very much. ICBAC, I may also tell, is uniting through its members nearly 9,000 companies, mid-sized and bigger international companies. So that means if you go to the international field, maybe we are representing directly and indirectly 90-95% of all foreign investment in Ukraine. We have seen your initiative. We have followed it up, at least in rough terms. So we are quite informed what you are doing. Congratulations for that. It's a big initiative. It's obviously more professional than previous initiatives in this respect. The only thing I may remark is a question of political will. So irrespective of you're doing, I think, a great job, the question is whether the other stakeholders, and some of them are malicious in Ukraine, maybe in parliament, etc., are joining your effort, are supporting your effort, because that will be the key to success or the key to failure. If you have support, if there is a unanimous understanding by all stakeholders. But the whole initiative now seems to be really professional, and you are doing a good job as compared to previous things. And I may say, also as a top manager, I have been heading international companies. I have been achieving financial restructuring of companies with several $100 million business volume, worldwide business, before I came to Ukraine. So I know what I'm talking about. The main point is that you are able to create trust by the international investors. And this trust is something what had been missing, and what was the reason why there was practically very little foreign investment even after the revolution of dignity. Let me start with the first question. If I take previous initiatives, previous plans, 2016, 17, 18, 19, the aims, the targets for privatization have been in the area of $600 to $800 million a year. Now you are planning and you are aiming at privatizing $800 million a year on average over the next 5 years, if I take your figures. Very simple question, maybe even primitive question. Take aside the legal things, because the problem is not so much with the law. It's also with the law, but not so much. The question is, are the stakeholders sticking to existing laws? It's the rule of law, the rule of existing law. So first question, we have a few of our members are even here, and they will have some questions later on. Let me start with the first question. What is different in real terms that you achieve just from privatization, an investment, and possibly mainly foreign investment, foreign direct investment of say $800 million a year, as compared to a total foreign direct investment last year of maybe 200 million or 100 million, and before that very, very low. What is different now? Why do you think you will be successful in real terms? Not talk about the law, talk about the essence, talk about the business.
Thank you very much for the question. Let me start from the commenting of the thesis that you shared in the very beginning, from the political will. If there is a political will, I may answer the following way. The political will on the level of personal president and personal prime minister, the previous one and the existing one is existing. I am meeting them once in 3 weeks, discussing specific topics, and I have the real will from like two top persons. But of course, this political will depend on many stakeholders. Members of parliament, which are very different, ministers, which are very different. So with the support of the business, I think we will heat up this political will for longer period at least. Because from the very beginning, after the elections, there was massive political will. And the State Property Fund received like 400 companies for privatization in 1 year. In previous 15 years, there were only 93 companies transferred to State Property Fund. Now we have to heat up this political will and give arguments to those who is trying to give counter-argument that there is no money, there is no investors, don't bring it to the auction, there will be cheap price, you will sell it cheap during the coronavirus, etc., etc. We showed on the so-called small and medium privatization in the previous year that there are money in the air, in the world, under the mattresses and somewhere. We just have to give comfort and transparency to the investor. The question with the protection of rights, police, prosecutor office is still the issue. And we are feeling this on our activity as well. So the justice and the rule of law is, from my point of view, is the largest problem of Ukraine for investments. This law gives some answers and gives more protections, if we go in the details, to the investors to be protected, not only the English law, but some other points of this law. But to finish my comment on your first question, there is a political will on top level, but on the middle level, this is where all this corruption is going on.
There is sabotage ongoing.
It's sabotage, but we have to push it from the business, and we have to push it from the top while showing the name, showing the specific agency which is not delivering, for example, asset to the privatization. Everything should be personalized. Every problem should have the name. Now we are having a special program to find, for example, non-core assets. We have found like 3,370 recreational complexes which are managed by the state tax administration, by the ministry of by the agency of something. And my question to the minister is, why you need this hotel in the downtown of Lviv if you have to collect taxes?
Excuse me to interrupt you. There is the same problem even in the Western world, in Austria and Germany, in the United States. So this is not a specific of Ukrainian situation.
But we have to learn and do better. So we have good examples and we have bad examples. So pointing specific assets and showing and giving light on it, sending letters, because even in the existing law on privatization, there is a clause that every businessman or every private person can send the letter saying that I would like to privatize specifically this asset. What's going on then? This letter goes to this governing body, and somebody, as I say, on the third floor is drafting the letter, then the ministry is then signing that we need it for something. Why you need it? Why you need it for your policy making? How it helps to execute your direct functions of policy making or establishing the clear rules for coronavirus fight or for the economic program of the government, which is now being prepared, but not by the Minister of Economy, but the NGO outside of the government. This is the question. Why you are not doing your direct work? Because probably you are busy with something else. So we have to heat it up. That's why we have done a lot of preliminary work in drafting this law, and we will be showing the examples, we will be showing the names and the specific examples that should help to transfer more and more these specific assets to the business. So this is commenting to the political will. This is constant fight. But we have I have the good feeling that we are fighting for the future of Ukraine against the past. Who is protecting the past? This middle-sized bureaucracy with no name. When you are getting the letter, which you know who drafted. Then
the rent seekers, they are sabotaging.
And we have to see on the other side, the active business community saying, guys, we have our money somewhere. You are looking for the investments in Ukraine. We would like to, we can do these investments. But where are the assets? Where is the investment menu? Why you are keeping this within the state sector and not delivering to the market? So this is the very clear differentiation between the future of Ukraine and the past of Ukraine. But without the active position of the business, this will not happen. I am not appealing to the people who are living in a normal life every day, going to job, or the pensioners. They will not fight for this reform. Only the business can fight for this Ukraine reform. That's why I'm speaking with you, with the business communities. And it's not necessary to go on the demonstration with the flags under the Cabinet of Ministers. We have to do it in a structured, civilized way, with the letters on the letterheads, with the letters directly to the heads of committees of parliament. This is to the members of parliament. We will help to give to share the addresses. We just need your desire and your practical step to send the letter, for example, because there is a myth that in this period nobody wants to invest in Ukraine. Yes, it's not easy to invest in Ukraine, and there are some others, but where to invest? Show us the investment menu. Give us the clear, open, transparent information about the assets. So let's do it together.
Thank you very much. Just one remark to that. Referring to the initiative to the try to privatize the Odessa port plant. This has been a very negative example in the past. This should not be repeated. Poison pills, lack of political will, sabotage, etc., etc. If you do it differently, you may be successful, provided that you are able to gain trust.
Absolutely, I agree with you. So one of the important tasks for this year is to restart so-called big privatization. In the Ukrainian law, there is a differentiation. What is small privatization? What is big privatization? Is the balance sheet price of the assets, like $10 million less, this small privatization, 10 million plus, so this is big privatization. In March 2020, when this coronavirus started, somehow in the law was in the parliament there was a law voted to fight with coronavirus, and there were many things, and among many things somebody put the text that the big privatization should be forbidden for the period of coronavirus. I still cannot find this name, but and it took us like 7 months to advocate in the parliament that at least they have to cancel the period of privatization, of preparation for the privatization, because preparation of big asset for privatization is a bit different process, hiring professional advisors, these are investment banks with Big Four, then approval by the Cabinet of Ministers, then in-depth due diligence, creating the proposal for starting price and post-privatization criteria, approval of Cabinet of Ministers. In normal core cases, it's like 8-11 months. So we lost 8 months last year in preparing this big assets privatization only because of this strange legal bargaining. So we canceled and we now have possibility, and we restarted preparation of big privatization. And now we agreed with the government, and Prime Minister submitted the law. It's a one-sentence law to allow big privatization. We have to approve it in the parliament next weeks, next months, to be able to put on the privatization. You can see on the screen now is a list of approximate large assets, middle-sized assets, and we can do the first large privatization since Kryvyi was privatized in 2005. This year, in the end of first quarter, most favorable beginning of the second quarter, this is United Mining in ore company, which is titanium ore production. This is the large 30-hectare site in the downtown of Kiev, the previous plant. Then we have for this year 6 regional distribution electricity companies, Oblenergos, and we are working with international donors to make them prepared better, because now we have RAB tariffs, so we are moving this. Within Odessa port plant, we completed 3 stages out of 5, because these are difficult assets with indebted in both sides. So the law, it's one sentence, allow big privatization. Of course, the Cabinet of Ministers then decide. It's not the State Property Fund. We are doing the homework with the advisor. We are submitting to the Cabinet of Ministers proposal on the starting price and on the post-privatization criteria, which we are trying to minimize. We believe in the rule of sense that the business will decide the business plan for himself. There are only minimum restrictions or post-privatization conditions which could be applied to the social part of the company or to the ecological part if there is a subject to some ecological regulation. The rest, the business plan should decide the business. So the big privatization is the real marker. It depends again on the political level. Parliament have to vote this one sentence, give possibility to organize auctions, and the Cabinet of Ministers have to approve our proposals that we will submit them within this month.
But you are optimistic that you will get sufficient votes in Parliament. Otherwise, it may not have been so wise to start the whole initiative if you think it will be blocked.
You know, we have done a lot of work in the previous year, talking, speaking, meeting with the members of Parliament different. And when you really speak to them, when you give them figures, examples, it's many things were hidden. I mean, even from different fractions, most of them do understand that deprivatization is not for getting revenues for the budget. Privatization is the source for bringing more investment. It's also new working places. It's a base for taxation. And if we all together with you will support it with the letter in the request from the business association directly to the parliament, they will have kind of civilized pressure request saying, okay, if business need this, then we will support. So we need the raise of voice of the business, again, very structured, civilized way, sending letter that we would be happy to invest, but show us the investment menu and give us the opportunity.
Okay, understood.
Special obligations.
You can be sure that the International Council of Business Associations and Chambers in Ukraine, ICBAC, will be on your side as long as we think you're doing the right thing and you're doing a good thing for Ukraine, which is of interest for the Ukrainian and especially international community. So we are now getting into more the questions and answers phase of this event. We are under coronavirus restrictions. That means only a few of our members are present here. As far as I know, it's a maximum of 5 people. And that means we have collected some questions I will ask later on, but I may start with a question with questions which are coming from the German-Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Markus, please come over. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. Very impressive presentation. Mostly I liked that you underlined that there I see a real shift from former policies. You're not focusing so much on revenues for the budget, but you are more focusing on successful privatizations. In this framework, our members have 2 questions. First question is there any platform foreseen in this new law draft for international development banks to participate? I know for many big German companies, they say, if we see, for example, the EBRD, the World Bank, the IFC, they are joining a privatization as a minor, not a majority investor, but as a minority investor, this would make it for us much easier to participate. Second question, and to some extent you already answered, how do you guarantee that successful privatization in the beginning will not be redone afterwards by some Ukrainian court, as we have seen this many times in the past?
Thank you, Mr. Markus, for these questions. We do understand that we have to break the ice and bring at least a few international strategic, they say, or reputable investors in Ukraine. And indeed, we have discussed with the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development, and the head of the regional office may confirm it also to you, that they are ready to share the to issue their formal obligation or proposal for some big assets. They have restriction, for example, for some energy companies which are CO2 emission, but for the others, the EBRD shared the possibility to issue they will be willing to participate as a minority shareholder in this big privatization assets. So this is the real plan. And we discussed it last year, and this will happen with the selected big privatization objects, because these will give also the kind of security and guarantees for international newcomer investor to Ukraine to be on the board, in the boat, with the good international reputable IFI. Also, we are with regard to the security, the further security and the courts, as I have already mentioned, yes, the English law on the big privatization assets to be able to resolve dispute on the English law jurisdictions, and some other amendments. We will share with you the English presentation with the key innovations of this legislation. And the law itself, it's big, it's long. As I said, it makes changes to 27 laws on Ukraine and three codes. It's already on the website of Parliament, but we will be, of course, ready to share it additionally to all members of the business community. And it's not late to make some comments, proposals to this law, because it will be the first reading, then the second reading in the Parliament, and the members of Parliament should hear the business voice. It should be just like structured and clearly articulated that this change or another change we need, we demand, etc. Mr. Marcus, if I answered your question. Also, with regard to other international financial organizations, we are cooperating closely with the IFC, discussing with them possibility to be involved as the advisors on some privatization assets, because we need high-quality advisors who are preparing these assets. This will also build the trust to the international investors that this data, which you can see in the investment memorandum or in the virtual data room, is verified, is trustworthy. And we, before even the law, we have drafted the new Cabinet of Minister decisions who gives the new regulation for the selection of the advisors for the big privatization, that it should be like two-level selection process. First is the pre-qualification criteria, and second also the specific object and the hiring of investment advisor.
Okay, Mr. Marcus answered? Okay, before I go on, and I have a question, and please come over from Mrs. Emma Touros, the head of the Canada-Ukraine Chamber of Commerce. Some remark, it's not only a question of a data room and a due diligence, it is also a question of an audit of the company. So do you plan to have audit reports by international audit companies, reputed international audit companies, concerning at least the financial aspects of the company? Because everybody knows that a major part of many businesses is in the shadows, and that is especially in the state. I may just make one remark. In agriculture, under the state, some 5 million hectares of land disappeared or have been stolen or whatever, or illegally rented out in the shadow, etc. So this may apply to the companies to be privatized as well. So due diligence and audits and guarantees. When you are selling something, you have to give the guarantee, like Mr. Marcus has said, that if there are problems, you are guaranteeing that they are solved, so that this is not to the disadvantage or to the detriment of the buyer if he is not guilty for that.
With
Sorry, Emma, one moment. Yeah.
Sorry, with the guarantees, it's more difficult questions. We, as a state property fund, cannot guarantee, but indeed, for every company, depending on the specialization, there are various advisors and consortium hired. If it's a real estate, it's a technical, financial, and tax audit. If it's an agricultural company, these are the other sides. But indeed, and that's why we need reputable companies that the investor will trust to their data and reports. With the guarantees from the state or from the state property fund is difficult question. We've been considering how we can implement it. Still not manageable, but the audit is signed and stamped with the companies, and on sale there will be put the asset with these criteria, with these debts, with these problems, with these possibilities. So this is what we are delivering to the market, and all these audits will be signed and approved by reputable companies and advisors. So this is the only instrument possible.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Touros from Canada-Ukraine Chamber.
Thank you. Just maybe as someone who came to business maybe in early 90s, in 1991, so I was lucky or unlucky to witness all kinds of privatization, both in Ukraine and in neighboring post-socialist countries. And there are two tactics or strategies. It depends on the point. Just first is privatization of profitable assets at a maximum price. Just that policy was adopted by such countries like Hungary, Czech Republic, and few others, if I'm not mistaken. And privatization. Second tactic is privatization of unprofitable companies, and unfortunately, knowing the Ukrainian realities, Ukraine went the second way, and suddenly the best assets, the best companies became hopelessly unprofitable and were privatized at a minimum price. So that's why I have a little concern about the law. Let's get back to the law, because now we are trying to fix the proper law. This will be fundamental for future privatization of prices. And just I see that we follow the second way, just when we privatize unprofitable companies, unprofitable assets with debts. Of course, price will be just not so attractive as well, so Ukraine can gain a lot from such way of privatization. And of course, shipwreckers will come to buy for peanuts all those companies with lost 5 million hectares and whatever. So, but I think that both ways have pros and cons, and all can be fixed through the way of preparation of companies for sale. For instance, if you are going to sell unprofitable company, maybe improvement of management and just fixing its assets and whatever can help to establish right price for enterprises, especially for large scale, just privatization. I think that this is really very, very important for Ukraine, and nobody else but Ukrainian can incorporate this in our laws. This is my point of view, and of course, point of view of people who are interested in just in fair privatization. I think that preparation of companies, not in terms of due diligence, but also improvement of management is very important, and maybe changing criteria is important as well, so to fix this problem when even profitable companies will become unprofitable in very short period of time, just because we haven't just right control here over just management of the state property. So this is my my little concern, and of course we can offer you spread of information about privatization and establishment of good relations with the investment community in Canada, and maybe just in other countries where Canada has good relations. So just establishment of B2B, of direct relations. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We'll comment and then answer your questions. This is very interesting and very in-depth question, which I would like to divide in two parts. One part is regarding the policy, which companies to privatize, which companies should stay with the government, and this policy should be identified at the level of policy making institutions, which is the parliament and the government. The State Property Fund is the central executive body which have to execute the policy. Within the absence of clear policy, we are having some difficulties, and we are trying to create this policy or advise on this policy. So profitable or non-profitable, this 3,600 companies that we still have on paper, honestly saying more than 1,000 should be just liquidated because they stay on paper. And which of them to be privatized, which of them not to be privatized, this is the decision of parliament and government. There was a list of prohibited companies for privatization amounting 1,400 companies. It was cancelled in the autumn of 2019 when the new parliament adopted. Until the moment, there is no list of the companies that should stay with the government and better managed, of course, and the rest logically could be privatized sooner or later, improved or not improved. This is the second stage. So the policy and the list of the companies is not identified. There is a knowledge in this world, and we should not invent the wheel. I think we should take just the best examples, but the understanding which what is the rule, what is the understanding, what is the role of the state, and what is the role of the private business should come. I don't see that it's clearly formulated. I am advocating that the state should do what is we have in the constitution, that the state should be strong regulator, should establish the fair rules, the laws should be executed, and enforcement agencies should work exactly to show that the law is existing, and the state should keep the minimum number of the companies which are critical infrastructure of the national monopolies, which you cannot privatize. Some companies that are continuation of your state services and functions. For example, for the moment, there is understanding that, for example, national post operator cannot be privatized in full because it delivers the pensions and the newspapers to the small villages, and the private company will not do it because it's not profitable business. So, but minority shares of this company probably could be either privatized or IPO or private placement or strategic investor to give better governance, management, and bring investment in this company. And the rest companies, which doesn't have any competitive advantage, which are not the critical infrastructure, which could be easily managed by the private sector, should be privatized. And then we can discuss on prepare them better or improve the management or increase the figures. To do this job, we need a lot of capacity, a lot of good paid management, independent supervisory board, and probably, so we are creating this function in the state property fund because we are not only the institution who should privatize, we are the only one institution in Ukraine which was designed in the constitution and in the law on state property fund that we are not policy making, we are executive body for privatization, for corporate government of state companies, for regulation of valuation market and for state property lease regulation. So we have our corporate management division, and my deputy Denis Kudin is now building this function properly, because also none of the companies that are in the state property fund could be privatized fast. No? We have to manage them with those limitations that the parliament imposed, improve. I don't know, United Mining and Ore Company, when we started to manage it this year, it will give profit 600 million instead of 100 million in the previous year. It took me 2 times to change the director, but there is a difference in 1 year when the same company. The Centroenergo, excuse me, it was a loss-making company in the year 2002, minus 2.2 billion. This year, it will be profitable. 1 year. And some other examples. But coming back to your question, the policy should be identified on the level of parliament, on the level of government. I am advocating my point of view that the state should be a strong judge, which should create good rules, fair regulations, establish motivating, demotivating taxation, understanding the role of Ukraine in the global value of change, value chain, where we are, why Europe needs us, what is our core functions, how we can be useful for the whole world. That's why we have to minimize taxation on some business, increase taxation on other business, and establish strong regulation. The rest should be done by business, and business should pay fair taxes and to be protected by the good rules. This is my view. Minimum size and number of state-owned companies, and stronger institutions, better regulation.
Thank you very much. I see 2 more colleagues of mine here. Is there any question? Maybe you come over, please.
For example, one of the example is the alcohol and spirit production that we are now selling. Yeah, that was
successfully selling.
It's successful, but because there was sorry, I'm commenting. So the state of Ukraine and the state of Belarus were probably one of the 2 European companies who had the monopoly of spirit production. This monopoly created corruption. 55% of the spirit was produced in the shadow. Centralized and local budgets losing, not receiving from 8 to 10 billion hryvnias annually. The decision was made by parliament to demonopolize. We are selling out of 78 these distilleries, 43 are not working. So we are not now selling them one by one, and it's a successful story. But after this, the stronger regulations should be created to regulate this market, licenses, permits, etc., etc. This is one of the good examples, I believe. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. Michael Tatsenko, Director of the US-Ukrainian Business Council, please.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to speak once again to a true capitalist. I'm not going to be afraid of this word, and to a person who understands the importance of procedure and the good bureaucracy. When it comes to this good bureaucracy, the question is more like 2 parts of one question. Would you talk a little bit about how you select the companies? Obviously, you mentioned the big four. When it comes to due diligence, when it comes to valuation of assets, we certainly understand it's very different when it comes to privatization of big strategic assets like Odessa port site plant, and maybe medium-sized assets like the distilleries that you mentioned. But when it comes to the smaller scale privatization, how do you deal with that? I mean, you don't hire one of the big four to evaluate a small plot of land somewhere or you know, a garage property, let's say. Would you talk about how you deal with that? I mean, do you go through Prozoro? Do you hire small local companies in that city to do that? And also when it comes to due diligence, and others were very diplomatic, I think, when it comes to that, but in the cases where the directors, the employees, and the shadow beneficiaries of the companies caused them to be either loss-making or strip them of assets. Do you work with the law firms and others who write the reports for you to then get this data and then perhaps submit this data to the prosecutor general office or to somebody else to get the people responsible for causing losses to the state to rectify this problem, to get them to pay back?
They are criminals.
Yeah, because I mean they're criminals. If they're stealing from the state, that's criminal. One of the important things, of course, is the chain of property rights. But another important thing is all those loans from interested parties, which state companies do not necessarily have to have, and they were put in there just to strip the money or the assets out of the state-owned companies. So do you go after the people who caused that? Maybe you would have some pointers for those who do the due diligence for you to what to look for. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Glad to see you again. Last time probably we had a good conversation and privatization of Dnipro Hotel. And thank you and the US-Ukraine Association for your support on this event. And answering your question, this was one of the examples how we are dealing with the information disclosure. Because in the existing law, we have like big privatization and small privatization. Big privatization, we have to hire the consortium of advisors with the good auditors, depend on the specific assets, tax due diligence, financial, technical sometimes, etc. So it's envisaged in the law. For the small privatization, there is no such requirements in the law. So we are doing this voluntarily on the different assets depending on the assets. It's a very big variety. If it's just a building, we have to disclose if it's a building with the land or the building with the lease of land or the building with this strange Ukrainian the right to use it, which is not a lease, yeah. So and then we have to create register this building, and before registration we have to create технический passport, technical certificate, which describes. So this is more easier. Sometimes this building, which is also a kind of company, doesn't have money, and we as a state property fund can do it for the budget money. And one invested hryvnia in year 2020 in the preparation of assets for privatization paid back by 71 hryvnia as the revenues from privatization. That's a good investment. I was advocating on the budget committee in parliament, because they gave us 250 million for the preparation of assets for privatization. And in March 2020, they took out 240 to the coronavirus fund, and we didn't have enough resources to invest in the preparation of the assets. That's why in this law we have this revolving fund and to refinance it. So with the big privatization, it's clear. It's we are creating the requirements, then we are having the pre-selection of the advisors. It's normally the committee that we are trying to bring from various institutions: Minister of Economy, Ministry of Finance, State Property Fund, and then there is the procedure is pretty transparent. So closed documents, and then they're open simultaneously, price, qualification, etc., etc. So this is only for the big privatization, and then we have to submit the pre-selected advisor or the consortium advisors to the Cabinet of Ministers, and Cabinet of Ministers should approve it, and only then they start their work. For the small privatization, which sometimes not very small, and the example of Dnieper Hotel is that in fact legally it's a small privatization, because what was on sale, what was on privatization, the privatization was 100% of shares of the state-owned company. So the minority, the price of these shares, which are not public, are not on we don't have very well developed stock market, and the price of the shares was 81 million hryvnia, and it's much less than the threshold from big small privatization. And legally we've been able just to put on Prozoro internet platform that 100% of shares of the hotel is on sale, please buy. But we asked international donors, USAID in this case, and they hired Baker McKinsey, Austrian engineering company, and others who did all this necessary technical, financial, and tax due diligence. All this information was submitted into the virtual data room. Everybody was able to analyze this information, and this brought to the good competition and good price. So 29 participants, etc., etc., with something which is between the small building where we have to just have the documents for the building, and between the Hotel Dnieper, which is also small. There are various cases. Normally, this is the inventory that should be done by the management of the company and signed and stamped. And they have legal responsibility for the balance sheet, for the description of assets which they have in this company. So this is where responsibility comes. So the directors of this company and the management should prepare this, and we are giving them very clear instructions and forms. For the small privatization, the involvement of some specific advisors is not necessary, but it's possible. In our case, mostly with the support of international financial institutions. For example, we have like Dnipropetrovsk plant, which is a balance sheet price less than 100 million hryvnias, but it's a plant which can build the trains. So definitely we apply to the donor community, asking them to pre-select technical, financial, and I don't remember another advisor, to make the proper preparation of this asset for the privatization. So this is how it works in our reality. We don't have possibility as a state property fund for the small privatization objects, hire, select, pre-select specific advisors, but we are doing this with the support for the international donors. This year, hopefully the big project will start, supported by USAID, for support of privatization. This will cover many areas. So because this law, so we spoke before about the policy level issues, but this law is mostly about the execution and instruments and very practical things which are helping to make this process better, open, fast, transparent, less bureaucratic, on a bad way of meaning this, but good way of meaning this. The questions with the policy is still existing, which is beyond this law. The policy is to identify which kind of company, I would like to say, which kind of country we are building. Are we judge, or we are judge and at the same time football players, and we cannot do both on the good quality level. Thank you.
What about going after the criminals?
Yes, we have, of course, these cases, and many cases we are protecting so-called the rights or protecting the state on assets, as I said.
Are you talking about going after the criminals? Because this will not be heard by the audience.
Going after the criminals, yeah. So we are in the process of 1,450 court cases at the moment. That's the statistics, and that takes a lot of time, efforts. But it's on the side on the legal system, which is not the state property fund. We are initiating, we are submitting documents, but honestly saying that the better is the private owner will fight with these problems. So I see the solution that even with some problems, the asset to be on sale, if those problems are clearly described, the new private owner will better fight with those poison pills, which you have mentioned, which sometimes in many state-owned assets are existing. The debts which are created in strange way, which are not real debts, etc., etc. Our role is much better disclose, show, and the role of the buyer having its legal advisor, financial analyst advisor to check on these documents and decide which debt they can fight in the courts or which debt is the normal story. In this law, we have also made the change that if the time to go to court is ended, for example, we have 3 years period that if you didn't you have to raise. So we continue this period for 6 years. So if you are buying the company with some problems and within the existing legislation you cannot go to court because time is finished, with this law you will have a new possibility to sue and to win, and this give you better understanding which price you can pay, because a lot of these assets are distressed assets or with some poison pills. But from my point of view, we cannot fight against everybody at the same time and win everybody. Yes, we are fighting, especially focusing on the most important cases, but if there are ongoing courts and some problems, we are describing it, disclosing it, showing in the website and in the virtual data room all financial data, all technical data, as I said, all pros and contras, and then the investor will decide. He will pay 1 hryvnia, and he will spend 2 hryvnia on lawyers, and then hopefully he will invest another 10 hryvnias. So this is the philosophy.
Thank you very much. This discussion directly leads to another question, and that is talking about poison pills, talking about overstaffing in many of these state-held companies, feather bedding, yeah? Because it was one of the functions in former times to keep more personnel than needed, not to have too much unemployment, etc., etc. This was the case in the Soviet Union, for example, and there are still a lot of examples, fewer, but still a lot of examples still existing in this respect. So, are you considering rather to sell via asset deals than to sell the legal entity? Because if I buy the legal entity, I may have to guarantee to keep the staff, to keep the employed people, yeah, which are maybe 50% more than I need in order to be profitable, etc., etc. So there are a lot of issues connected to this, and the question is, asset deals possible basically, or do I have to buy the legal structure?
Very professional question, I may say, and both ways. Sometimes we cannot sell the something which is at standalone assets because it's real company. If it's a small privatization like Hotel Dnieper, we are saying post-privatization conditions is to pay back the debts if they are accurate and it's visible in the financial statements, and have flexibility to fire or hire within the period of 6 months, which is just what we have in the other law on the code of the labor, and we are trying not to exceed it. Philosophically, politically, I am advocating the thesis because many politicians are saying you cannot fire even the companies that we are now managing, preparing for the privatization. In some of those, we are cutting personnel, but I am showing the example that it's now different problem. It's not that we have to preserve people working there. It's vice versa. It's the private sector is looking for the workers, and yes, people who get used to work on the state-owned company with the salary of 8,000 hryvnias, coming at 8 o'clock in the morning, leaving at 3 o'clock in the day, sometimes not being heavily involved in the work, they are afraid of this. They do afraid of this, and we have, and we will have more and more cases of the профсоюзы, trade unions and all the stuff. But if you look on the statistics, that people who are fired from state-owned companies, in general, they are finding the new job within the period of 1.5 months, in average, the new job in private sector. Better paid, usually, and we are looking for those people to be an example that our philosophy is the right one, that we should not afraid to fire people today if they are extra on this production, because the private sector is missing people. Ukrainians went to Eastern Europe to find better job and work. Poles went to Germany and to Great Britain. Germany is creating specific programs to hire most educated engineers, etc. So there is another problem, a problem with the qualified people. So we should not preserve them on these state-owned enterprises. It's just the matter of political speculation, trade union speculations, but we have to work better with communication, as we are now trying to do, finding the private business, the investors who took part in the auctions, who bought something in 1 million hryvnia, the uncompleted construction. Then he invested 70 million hryvnia into the uncompleted construction. Then he has a 4-star hotel on the bank of the sea in Azov Sea, and he created 50 working places. And we are showing this is the real result of privatization, but not the revenues to the budget. Or the old plant in Kharkov, which produced TV, Berezka, which is sold Soviet time TV. It was not competitive with Siemens in the TV production. So it's closed its operation. It was on privatization. The new private entrepreneurs invested in the building, refurnishing, construction, and they created a new production of chargers for electric cars. This is the most visualized example how the private sector could do better, could win the competition, find better solution in the globalized market, and this is the whole philosophy of privatization. We just have to find it and to show that the politicians to give arguments. For this law, we also have a lot of arguments because there are many controversial issues we still have to advocate. For example, write-off tax debts. So there are a lot of assets which are heavily indebted by tax debts. And for many years, sometimes dozens of years, these tax debts are fixed, they are submitted, the asset is like 12 times less valuable than this tax asset. And mentally, you understand that you will never get this tax paid, this debt. But there must be a political decision, and we put it in the law, that if there is a privatization of these assets, the buyer will know that if this tax debt was accumulated before year 2001, this will be write off, and the investor will pay something for this. You understand the philosophy, yeah? It's very bright political decision, because then the state have to fix its losses in the state books, but otherwise it's still no decision.
It's a pragmatical solution.
Yeah, pragmatical. So we agreed it with the head of state tax committee and the parliament and all the budget committee. So we were able to agree this with the policy makers. Of course, the lady on the third floor in the Ministry of Finance will be always against this. But it's not her business. It's the business of policy makers. Very often, the bureaucracy is ruling the politicians. Our law is trying to fix the policy issues, and then the bureaucracy should execute these policy issues, not vice versa.
Okay, thank you. Coming back to overstaffing, sorry for that. Basically, you're right, but the question is also the qualification, the quality of people. Because those people in state-held companies who are overstaffed under the overstaffing, which are not, who are not really necessary, they are in most cases the people who are worst educated, who are maybe not reliable. It's a negative selection in that case. And this is not a problem of Ukraine. It's a problem everywhere when you have a privatization. So if I buy a company which holds a factory, I'm telling you that because I was directly involved in former times as director of mergers and acquisitions, business development in Czechoslovakia before there was a split between Czechia and Slovakia. 5 plants in now Slovakia to be bought from the state. Yeah, I was responsible for the project, so I know what I'm talking about. The factory has 1,000 people. I completely, when I enter the factory and I see the concierge, there are 4 people sitting in there. In Western Europe, you don't have one. You have an electronic Schlagbomb, and that's it. Yeah. So you have to get rid of 500 of them, or 600 out of this 1,000. So, do you plan, or is it part of the concept that the buyer has to guarantee the number of people employed?
Again, when we speak about big privatization, this will be a difficult decision and discussions on the level of Cabinet of Ministers when we will submit the proposal on the post-privatization conditions to the Cabinet of Ministers. If you want to do it the right way, like it was done in many countries, let's then hire the specialized companies who will analyze the personnel in those companies, who will think about the potential new professions that they should be taught, who will think in which areas of Ukraine this profession will be on demand. They will think about their kids and their wives, what they can do in this life, what will happen in this enterprise will be closed, where they will find a new job. They will pay them probably first half a year or a year average salary, then second year 50% of the salary, help them to be integrated and reintegrated. This is the right approach. Who should think about this in the country? Ministry of Economy and Labor.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Just to tell you, this is not an Ukrainian problem. Look at Alitalia.
Yeah,
the Italian airline could not be sold because there was always the proviso to keep the personnel. And there was a lot of overstaffing, or quality of personnel is a real issue there. So this will come, I tell you. You will have these problems regularly and maybe on a big scale in future.
We will manage this, believe me. But again, I am always underlining that indeed I am having questions as I would be the policy maker and the execution and the manager of all state property on the other hand. We are just the state property fund. We are execution of policy. Yes, we are drafting the laws. Yes, we are drafting the sub-laws, and we are asking to give us this order that we will execute. Because this policy level is not strong enough yet, unfortunately.
And not really professional. So you are a professional body, so it depends on you.
Thank you very much, but I like to be responsible for what I am really responsible and do my job well. I came to the fund 1 year ago. I created a team. We built the new procedures. We identified where the problems. We drafted the law. We agreed this law on the many levels. Now we want this law to be adopted, and then sub-laws to be adopted, and then we will execute our work better. Yes, we can draft the policies for reintegration of labor, but it's not our job.
Fully understood. I have still 2 colleagues of us are here. Any further questions from members of the International Council? So I would have to thank you, Mr. Sennychenko. I do hope it was an interesting event, an interesting discussion, maybe even a little bit of a debate. And as General Secretary of ICBAC, I may assure you, we may continue that in a way which is fit and which is fruitful for all of us. And we wish you all the best concerning the next steps. And if you want us to be with you, to support you, etc., we may talk about it. We are ready, we are open, because as I was mentioning at the beginning, basically we are representing maybe 90–95% of the countries which have given foreign investment in Ukraine in the past. Thank you very much
for this opportunity. I would say it's nice, and I have pleasure talking to smart people. And it's not always the opportunity that I have in my job.
I may give that back.
Yes. To fix the results, we have support of President and Prime Minister. We need structured support of the business. And then from both sides, we can fight this middle-level bureaucracy in a very structured, civilized way. We have our investor relations office in the State Property Fund. We will answer all the questions related to the potential subject of investment and privatization. We have my colleagues, and here Konstantin, we will share with you the context that we will ask you to give your structured support to the changes, to raise the voice of the business, because we are often having problem that politicians saying which privatization you're talking about in the coronavirus period. There is no money in the world to invest in Ukraine. So there is a lot of money. Just create the investment.
It's not at the right place, the money. There is enough money. Yeah, there are hundreds of billions waiting for investment.
Even printed for the fight of coronavirus in the world. Yeah, but so we have to show the willingness to consider, without any obligation, that we will invest. Show us the better way, show us the better regulation, give us better comfort, and we will consider. Because Ukrainian government, parliament, president, they all asking for investments to come. We have to give the raise of voice that business is ready, maybe, show us the clear rules, show us the better regulations, judges, etc. is also the subject, but we should be very focused, for example, on this law, or we can make some amendments to this. So again, let's do it together. Thank you very much.
So we will try, and you please create the environment that the international community can have trust in the privatized projects to be companies to be privatized. Thank you very much.
you.
It's been a
Thank you,
pleasure.
everybody.
Thank you.
Just a moment.